Koroth had lived in silence for a very long time. The translator device that the Velfari had put in his head allowed him to understand every language in the galaxy. He heard everything the prisoners said about him: monster, beast, killer. He heard the guards joke about his kills. He heard the Velfari lords discuss him like he was property, like he was a machine made for violence and nothing else. He had stopped responding to any of it decades ago. There was no point. Words meant nothing in Nexar Prime. Only blood mattered here, only survival. But this small human had said something that cracked open a door Koroth thought he had sealed forever. The human had said he was sorry. Not sorry for himself, not begging for his life. He was sorry for what had been done to Koroth. Nobody had ever said that to him before. "You know nothing about me, small one," Koroth rumbled from his cell. "You see what you want to see. A story that makes you feel better about dying." The human did not flinch. He did not run away. He just sat there on the cold floor with his back against the energy barrier. "Maybe," the human said, "but I do not think so. My name is Danny Marsh. What is yours? Your real name, not what the Velfari call you." Koroth almost laughed. It had been so long since anyone had asked his name. "I am Koroth of the Northern Mountains. At least I was, before they destroyed my world, before they killed my people. Now I am just Koroth, the last Drakkari." Danny nodded slowly. "I am sorry about your world. That is a terrible thing." "Your sorrow changes nothing." "No," Danny agreed, "but sometimes it helps to know that someone cares, even a stranger." They talked through the night. At first, Koroth gave only short answers. He did not trust this small creature. He did not understand why Danny was not afraid. But as the hours passed, something strange happened. Koroth found himself saying more, telling things he had not spoken about in many years. He told Danny about his homeworld. The forests there had trees so tall that they touched the clouds. The rivers ran clean and cold from the mountains. His people had lived there for 1,000 generations. They were warriors, yes, but they were also builders and poets and musicians. They loved their children and honored their elders. They were not the savages that the Velfari claimed they were. Danny listened to every word. He asked questions, real questions, not the mocking questions that guards sometimes asked. He wanted to understand. "Do you have any family left?" Danny asked softly. The question hit Koroth like a blade to the heart. He was quiet for a long moment. "I had a mate," he finally said. "Her name was Verith. She had scales the color of sunset. We had 3 children together. When the Velfari came, I was away hunting. By the time I returned, my village was burning. I searched for days. I found Verith in the ruins of our home. She had been protecting our children. They were all gone." Danny said nothing. There were no words for such pain. "I fought the Velfari for 10 more years after that," Koroth continued. "I killed many of them, but there were always more. They came with ships and weapons that we could not match. One by one, my brothers and sisters fell, until I was the last one standing. They did not kill me. They thought it would be more entertaining to make me fight forever, to make me into the thing I hate most. A slave," Danny said. "Worse, a weapon that kills the innocent. Every time I step into that arena, I kill people who have done nothing wrong, people who are prisoners just like me, and I cannot stop. I cannot refuse." "Why not?" Koroth's massive fist clenched so hard that his claws drew blood from his own palm. "Because they told me what would happen if I ever refused to fight. They would execute 10 prisoners from the holding cells. They made me watch the first time. I saw a mother and her child die because I tried to say no. I will not let that happen again." Danny was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, His voice was gentle. "That is not being a monster, Koroth. That is being a prisoner with a conscience. There is a big difference." Koroth did not know how to respond to that. For 37 years, he had believed himself to be evil. He had accepted the guilt of every death. He had let that guilt crush him into something less than what he once was. And now this tiny human was telling him that he was not the villain of this story. It was too much. It was not enough. It was everything. When the artificial sunrise lit the prison block, the guards came for Danny. They opened the cell and grabbed him roughly by the arms. It was time for his fight. His execution. Koroth rose to his full height. His voice echoed through the corridor like thunder. "Wait." The guards stopped. They turned to look at him. Even after all these years, they were still afraid of the champion. "I wish to speak to the arena masters," Koroth said. "I will fight any challenger they choose today. Any 10 challengers. In exchange, the human called Danny Marsh does not enter the arena." The guards looked at each other in confusion. This had never happened before. The champion had never asked for anything. He had never shown interest in any prisoner. "Why do you care about this human?" one guard asked. Koroth looked at Danny. The small mechanic was staring at him with shock. Something that looked like hope. "That is not your concern," Koroth said. "Deliver my message. The arena masters will want to hear it." The guards laughed. But they also dragged Danny back to his cell, instead of to the arena. They went to deliver the message, because Koroth was right. The Valthari loved new entertainment, and the idea of their champion making special requests was very interesting indeed. Danny sat in his cell and stared across the corridor at Koroth. "Why did you do that?" he asked. Koroth sat back down against the wall. "Because you spoke to me like I was a person. Because you showed me kindness when you had nothing to gain from it. In my culture, such things are repaid. I cannot pay you back for saving my life. You already have, small one. You reminded me that I am still Koroth of the northern mountains, that they have not destroyed everything that I was." Danny did not fight that day, or the next day, or the day after that. Word spread through the prison like fire. The monster Koroth had taken a human under his protection. The prisoners whispered and wondered what it meant. Some humans accused Danny of being a traitor. Some aliens thought he had strange powers. The truth was much simpler than any of them could imagine. Two lonely souls had found each other in the darkness, and that small connection would change everything. 3 months passed on Nexar Prime. The seasons did not change, because there were no seasons in this place. The artificial lights turned on and off to mark day and night. The guards came and went. Prisoners died in the arena. New prisoners arrived to take their place. The cycle of misery continued without end. But something had changed for Danny and Koroth. Every night, when the prison block fell dark and quiet, they talked. Their conversations became longer. Their bond grew stronger. Danny learned to speak the Dracarai language. It was difficult. The words were rough and deep, made for a throat much larger than his. But he practiced every day. Koroth corrected his mistakes with patience that surprised them both. When Danny finally managed to say friend in perfect Dracarai, Koroth made a rumbling sound that Danny realized was laughter. Koroth learned about humans. He was fascinated by their history. Danny told him about Earth, about the wars they had fought against each other before they reached the stars. He told him about how humans had been conquered many times throughout their history, by other humans, by nature, by disease, and every time they had risen again. "Your species is strange," Koroth observed one night. "You are small and weak. You have no claws, no scales, no natural weapons, yet you survive. You spread across the stars. How?" Danny thought about it for a moment. I think it is because we are too stubborn to know when to quit. We look at impossible situations, and we think maybe there is still a way, even when there is not. That sounds like madness. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it is also the only reason we are still alive. Koroth was quiet for a while. Then he said, "My people were strong, the strongest warriors in our region of space. But we were also proud. When the Velfari came with their ships and their weapons, our leaders said we would crush them easily. They were wrong. Pride killed us. Perhaps madness would have served us better." The other prisoners watched Danny with confusion and suspicion. How could a human have any kind of relationship with the monster who had killed so many? Some of the other humans stopped talking to Danny. They called him a fool. They said he was playing with fire. Danny did not care. He had found something real in this terrible place. He was not going to let fear take it away from him. One morning, the guards came to the corridor with an announcement. They stood in the center of the block and read from a glowing tablet. "By order of the arena masters," the guard said, "a special event will be held in 10 days. The human prisoner known as Danny Marsh will fight in the arena. His opponent will be Koroth the Unbroken. This fight will be to the death. There will be no exceptions and no delays." Danny felt the blood drain from his face. Around him, the other prisoners gasped and whispered. Koroth rose slowly to his feet. His amber eyes were burning with rage. "This was not our agreement. I was promised that he would not fight." "The arena masters have made their decision," the guard said. He was smiling. They all were. "Your friendship with the human has become bad for morale. The other prisoners are starting to think that kindness is possible here. That cannot be allowed. You will kill him in front of everyone. You will remind them all that there is no hope in Nexar Prime." The guards left. The corridor fell silent. Danny sat down slowly on the floor of his cell. His hands were shaking. He had known this day might come. He had tried not to think about it. But now it was here. "Danny," Koroth's voice was gentle, which made it somehow worse. "I did not want this. I know. I will make it quick. You will not suffer. That is the only mercy I can give you." Danny looked up at his friend, at the massive alien who had protected him for 3 months, who had shared stories and laughter and grief with him across the barrier of their cells. He thought about what Koroth had said about humans, too stubborn to know when to quit. "Or," Danny said slowly, "we could do something else." Koroth tilted his head. "What do you mean?" "I have been watching this place for months, Koroth. I have been listening. I have been learning. Back on my ship I was a mechanic. I fixed engines and power systems, and every power system has the same basic rules. It needs fuel, it needs connections, it needs flow. If you interrupt any of those things, the system fails. The arena has shields that can stop weapons from space. The prison has thousands of guards. No one has ever escaped from Nexar Prime. Because no one has ever tried it with a Drakkari warrior and a guy who knows how to break machines." Danny stood up and walked to the edge of his cell. "I know where the main generator is. I have figured out how to reach it through the maintenance tunnels. The tunnels are too small for the guards to follow. Too small for you, but not too small for me." Koroth stared at him. "You want to shut down the power to the entire prison. If the power goes down, the shields go down, the cell barriers go down, the doors open. Every prisoner in this place would be free at the same time. It would be chaos. The guards could not stop all of us. Many would die. Many are dying anyway, slowly, in the arena, one by one. At least this way, some of us might actually escape." Koroth was silent for a long time. Danny could see him thinking, processing, weighing the odds. Finally, the massive alien spoke. "It is a foolish plan. The chances of success are very small. Yes, we would probably both die. Yes, but there is a chance, a small one, that some of us might live. Yes. Koroth looked at Danny. In his amber eyes, there was something that had not been there before. Something that Danny recognized. It was hope. Fragile and small and dangerous, but real. I have not hoped for anything in 37 years, Koroth said. I had forgotten what it felt like. So had I, Danny admitted. But here we are. Koroth nodded slowly. Tell me your plan, my friend. Tell me everything. If we are going to die, let us die trying to live. Over the next 10 days, they planned. Danny observed the guard rotations and mapped the maintenance tunnels in his mind. Koroth observed the arena and found the weak points in their defenses. They talked in whispers. They prepared for what was coming. The other prisoners noticed the change in them. They saw Danny and Koroth talking with more intensity than before. They did not know what was happening, but they could feel something in the air. Something was about to break. And when it did, nothing would ever be the same. The day of the fight arrived. Danny woke up to the sound of guards banging on the cell barriers. Around him, the other humans were stirring. Some of them looked at him with pity. Some of them looked away. They all knew what was about to happen. They all expected to watch him die. One of the older humans, a man named Pete, who had been captured 6 months before Danny, came over to him. Pete had gray hair and tired eyes. He had lost his wife and son when the Velthari took their colony ship. I know the others have been hard on you, Pete said quietly, but I want you to know that I understand why you talk to him. Sometimes finding a friend is worth more than staying safe. Danny clasped Pete's hand. Thank you, and listen to me carefully. When everything goes dark today, run for the landing platforms. Do not stop. Do not look back. Just run. Pete looked confused. What do you mean? What is going to happen? But Danny did not have time to explain. The guards were opening the cell. They grabbed him and dragged him toward the preparation chambers beneath the arena. The tunnels under the arena were cold and damp. Danny had memorized the layout from watching guards and listening to conversations. He knew that the preparation chambers were close to the maintenance tunnels. He knew that he would have a brief moment when no one was watching. He just needed to be ready. They gave him armor. It was thin and useless, barely more than leather stretched over metal plates. They gave him a weapon. It was a short blade that would do nothing against Koroth's scales. They were not trying to give him a fair fight. They were dressing him up for a proper execution. The champion will make it quick, one guard said with a cruel smile. He always does when he respects his opponent. You should feel honored. He strapped on the armor and took the blade. His eyes moved around the room, counting guards, noting exits, tracking movements. Then he saw it. A maintenance hatch in the corner of the room, partially hidden behind a pile of old weapons. The hatch was small. Too small for the guards. Too small for almost any species that the Velthari kept as prisoners. Just right for a human. Above them, the crowd was roaring. Danny could hear the announcer's voice echoing through the stone ceiling. The fight was being introduced. Koroth was already in the arena. The Velthari were screaming with excitement. The guards turned to escort Danny to the arena floor. But in that moment, something happened. A distant explosion shook the chamber. The lights flickered. The guards looked at each other in confusion. Danny did not wait to find out what had caused the explosion. Koroth had arranged that distraction. One of his old contacts in the prison, a prisoner who owed him a favor, had set off a small fire in the supply wing. It was nothing dangerous, just enough to make the guards nervous. In the confusion, Danny ran. He was small and fast. The guards shouted behind him, but he had already reached the maintenance hatch. He ripped it open and squeezed inside before anyone could grab him. The tunnel was dark and tight. It scraped against his shoulders and back, but he kept moving. Behind him, he heard the guards trying to follow. They were too big. They could not fit. They shouted for someone to find another way around. But Danny was already gone. The tunnels were exactly where he had predicted they would be. He crawled through darkness, guided only by the sound of humming power conduits above his head. He counted turns. He followed the vibrations. Every power system had a heart, a central point where everything connected. He was heading for that heart now. Above him, he could hear the crowd going quiet. The announcer was explaining that there was a delay. The human had escaped from the preparation chambers. Guards were searching for him. The fight would continue shortly. Koroth was in the arena, waiting. Danny knew his friend was putting on a show, roaring and stomping around to keep the audience entertained. Buying time. Believing in the crazy human and his impossible plan. Danny crawled faster. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, he found it. A larger chamber at the end of the tunnel, and inside that chamber, a machine so massive that it made Danny's breath catch in his throat. The main generator of Nexar Prime. It was a tower of crystal and metal that pulsed with blue light. Energy flowed through it in visible waves. It hummed with a sound that Danny could feel in his bones. This single machine powered everything. The shields, the barriers, the weapons, all of it. 2 technicians were in the room. They were krill, an insectoid species that served the Velthari as engineers. They had 6 legs and 4 arms, and heads that looked like beetles. They were not warriors, they were workers. Danny did not want to hurt them, but he could not let them stop him. He burst out of the tunnel and grabbed the first tool he saw. It was a heavy wrench, used for tightening bolts. The krill turned toward him with surprise. They clicked and hissed in their language, reaching for alarm buttons on the wall. Danny moved without thinking. He swung the wrench and knocked the first krill down. The second one lunged at him with all 4 arms. Danny ducked under the attack and drove his shoulder into the creature's chest. They crashed to the ground together. Danny brought the wrench down again. Then there was silence. Danny stood over the 2 bodies, breathing hard. He had never killed before. Not like this. Not up close. He could feel something inside him breaking. But there was no time to think about it. No time to grieve. He turned to the generator. Danny did not understand alien technology. He did not know what the crystals did or how the energy flowed. But he understood power systems. He understood that every system needed connections, fuel lines, control circuits, safety mechanisms. If you broke enough of the right things in the right order, everything would fail. He started pulling cables. He started smashing crystals. He used the wrench on everything that looked important. Sparks flew around him. The humming of the generator changed pitch, becoming unstable. Warning lights began to flash. Alarms began to wail. Somewhere in the distance, guards were shouting about a problem in the generator room. But they were too late. Danny found the main power conduit. It was a thick cable of woven metal that connected the generator to everything else. He wrapped both hands around it and pulled with all his strength. The cable resisted. He pulled harder. His muscles screamed. His back felt like it was tearing apart. The cable snapped. The lights went out. The generator screamed and then fell silent. And above him, in the arena and throughout the entire prison, every barrier, every shield, and every lock suddenly stopped working. Danny stood in the darkness, surrounded by the smell of burning metal and the distant sound of chaos. He was bleeding from a dozen small cuts. His body ached from the crawl through the tunnels. But he was smiling. He had done it. Now it was Koroth's turn. When the lights went out, the arena fell into screaming chaos. 200,000 Velthari spectators panicked in the darkness. They trampled each other, trying to reach the exits. Guards ran in every direction, shouting orders that nobody followed. The emergency systems tried to activate, but Danny had broken too many things. Nothing worked. Nothing could work. In the center of the arena, Koroth stood perfectly still. His amber eyes could see in the dark. He had been born in caves beneath the mountains of his homeworld. Darkness was an old friend. He had felt the moment the power died. He had known instantly that Danny had succeeded. The impossible human had actually done it. And now it was time for Koroth to keep his part of the promise. Koroth the Unbroken raised his head and roared. It was not the theatrical roar he used for entertainment. It was the war cry of the Dracorai. It was the sound his people had made when they charged into battle against impossible odds. It echoed through the arena like thunder. It shook the walls. It froze the guards where they stood. Then Koroth moved. He was across the arena floor before anyone could react. His forearms grabbed the first guards he reached. He threw them aside like they weighed nothing. More guards came running with weapons drawn. They fired at him. The energy blasts burned his scales and left smoking marks on his body. He did not slow down. Koroth tore through them. 37 years of rage came pouring out. Every death he had been forced to cause, every moment of shame and grief, every night he had spent alone in his cell, hating himself and hating his captors. All of it became fuel for the fire that now burned inside him. Guards died by the dozen. Their weapons could not stop him. Their armor could not save them. He was a Dracorai warrior, unleashed, and nothing in the arena could match his fury. Throughout the prison, the cell barriers flickered and died. Prisoners stumbled out of their cells in confusion. Some ran, some fought, some fell to their knees and cried, because they did not know what else to do. Danny emerged from the maintenance tunnels into the middle of the chaos. He was battered and bloody, covered in burns from the generator room. But he was alive. He looked around at the fighting and the running and the screaming. "The landing platforms," he shouted at every prisoner he passed. "Go to the landing platforms. There are ships there. Go now." Some listened, some did not. Danny could not save everyone. He could only try to save as many as possible. He ran toward the arena. The passages that led to the arena floor were filled with bodies. Velthari guards mostly, but also some prisoners who had been caught in the crossfire. Danny stepped over them and kept moving. He had to find Koroth. He had to make sure his friend was still alive. He burst through a doorway and found himself on the arena floor. Koroth was in the center, surrounded by the bodies of at least 50 guards. More were coming from every entrance, but they hesitated at the edges of the arena. They had seen what the champion could do. They were afraid. "Koroth!" Danny shouted. The massive Dracorai turned. His scales were scorched and bleeding in a dozen places. One of his arms hung at a bad angle, probably broken. But when he saw Danny, his amber eyes lit up with something like joy. "Danny Marsh," Koroth bellowed, "you magnificent, insane little creature. You actually did it." "I told you I was good with engines," Danny shouted back. A group of guards tried to rush them from the left. Koroth intercepted them with terrible efficiency. Danny grabbed a fallen weapon from the ground, some kind of energy pistol, and fired at guards coming from the right. He had never used an alien weapon before. His aim was bad, but at this range, it did not matter much. More prisoners were flooding into the arena now. They had heard the fighting. They had seen the guards falling. Hope was spreading through Nexar Prime, like a disease that the Velthari could not cure. "The landing platforms are this way," Koroth said, pointing toward a large doorway at the far end of the arena. "I know the path. Stay close to me." They ran together, the small human and the giant alien. Around them prisoners followed, humans and krill and a dozen other species, all of them running toward freedom. The guards tried to stop them. Of course they did. But there were too many prisoners now. The flood could not be held back. For every prisoner who fell, 10 more pushed forward. The years of cruelty and suffering had created something that the Velthari had never expected. Unity. Shared anger. A common enemy. The landing platforms were chaos. Ships of all sizes sat waiting. Velthari civilians were trying to escape. Guards were trying to restore order. Prisoners were trying to steal anything that would fly. Koroth pointed to a large transport ship at the edge of the platform. That one. It is big enough for many of us. I can fly it. You know how to fly? Danny asked in surprise. My people traveled the stars long before the Velthari existed. Now move. They fought their way to the ship. Danny shot at anyone who tried to stop them. Koroth cleared the path with his massive fists. Behind them, Pete and dozens of other prisoners followed. They reached the ship and piled inside. Koroth ran to the controls. His fingers moved across panels and buttons with surprising grace. The engines hummed to life. Everybody hold on to something, Koroth warned. The ship lifted off the platform just as a wave of guards reached them. Energy blasts bounced off the hull. The ship shook and groaned. But Koroth pushed the engines harder, and they rose into the dark sky of Nexar Prime. Below them, the prison was burning. Multiple ships were escaping in different directions. The Velthari were scrambling fighters, but there were too many targets, too much confusion. Some ships were shot down. Many more escaped into the darkness of space. Koroth pushed the transport to maximum speed. The stars stretched around them as they jumped into faster-than-light travel. And then suddenly, there was silence. They had escaped. Danny slumped against a wall in the cargo hold. Around him, prisoners were crying and laughing and embracing each other. Pete sat down next to him, tears streaming down his face. I do not know how you did it, Pete said. But thank you. Thank you. Danny just nodded. He was too tired for words. Koroth came back from the controls. He sat down heavily across from Danny. Even sitting, he towered over everyone else in the room. But no one was afraid of him anymore. They had seen him fight for them. They had seen him lead them to freedom. Where will we go? Danny asked. Koroth was quiet for a moment. Then slowly his massive jaw twisted into something that might have been a smile. There are others like us out there, he said. Other species that the Velthari have conquered. Other prisoners who dream of freedom. We will find them. We will help them. And then we will teach the Velthari what happens when they give the powerless a reason to hope. Danny looked at his friend, at the scars and wounds that covered the giant alien, at the fire that still burned in those amber eyes. I am just a mechanic, Danny said. I fix things. Koroth reached out and placed one of his massive hands on Danny's shoulder. The touch was surprisingly gentle. Yes, Koroth agreed, and the galaxy is very broken. There is much work to do. Danny thought about everything that had happened. The capture, the prison, the fear and the darkness and the despair, and then the friendship that had grown in the most unlikely place. The hope that had sparked from a single conversation. He had been nobody special, just a man who fixed engines and kept his head down. But he had spoken to a monster who was not really a monster. He had seen a person where others saw only a killer, and that small act of courage had changed everything. Okay, Danny said. Let us get to work. The ship carrying the mechanic and the warrior vanished into the stars. Behind them, word was already spreading. Prisoners on 100 worlds heard the story. A single human had risked everything to befriend the most feared fighter in the galaxy. Together, they had done the impossible. And the universe would never be the same. The prison planet of Nexar Prime was a place where hope came to die. It floated in the darkness of space like a wound that would never heal. The Veltari Empire had built it for one purpose. They wanted to break the spirits of every species they had conquered. And they did this through blood and pain and death in the arena. Danny Marsh had been on Nexar Prime for 3 months. Before the Veltari captured him, he had been a simple man with a simple life. He was 26 years old. He worked as a mechanic on a cargo ship that moved supplies between human colonies. He fixed engines. He played cards with his crewmates. He called his mother every Sunday when the communication signals were strong enough. Then the Veltari warship had appeared out of nowhere. It had torn through the cargo ship like a knife through paper. Danny remembered the screams. He remembered the blinding light of energy weapons. He remembered waking up in chains on a transport vessel packed with other humans. Now he sat in a holding cell with 43 other prisoners. The cell was cold. The food was bad. The guards were cruel. Every few days, they would come and take someone away to fight in the arena. Those people never came back. Danny knew his turn would come soon. He was not big. He was not strong. He had never been in a real fight in his entire life. When the guards finally called his name, he would walk into that arena, and he would die. This was a fact he had accepted. There was no point in pretending otherwise. But even though Danny had accepted his own death, something else bothered him. Something that kept him awake at night while the other prisoners slept. Across the corridor from the human holding cell, there was a special chamber. It was built with walls 3 feet thick. The energy barriers around it hummed with enough power to light a small city. Inside this chamber, alone and silent, stood the most feared creature in all of Nexar Prime. His name was Koroth. The guards called him Koroth the Unbroken. He was a Dracarai, a species of giant reptilian warriors, from a world that the Veltari had destroyed decades ago. He stood almost 14 feet tall. His body was covered in scales as black as night. He had 4 arms, each one thick with muscle, and covered in scars from countless battles. His eyes were amber-colored, and they glowed faintly in the dim light of the prison. Koroth had been a prisoner on Nexar Prime for 37 years. In that time, he had fought in the arena over 2,000 times. He had never lost, not once. He had killed warriors from 100 different species. He had torn apart monsters that made other prisoners scream just from looking at them. The Veltari loved him, their undefeated champion. Every prisoner on Nexar Prime knew 3 rules about Koroth. Do not look at him. Do not talk to him. Do not even think about approaching his cell. He was a killer, a monster, a beast that existed only to destroy. Danny had heard all the stories. He had listened to the other humans whisper warnings about the creature across the corridor. But Danny was also a man who liked to watch. He liked to observe. Back on the cargo ship, he had been the one who could tell when an engine was about to fail just by listening to its sound. He noticed things that other people missed. And Danny had noticed something about Koroth that nobody else seemed to see. One day, the guards dragged a wounded prisoner past Koroth's cell. The prisoner was crying and begging for mercy. The guards were laughing. They were taking the wounded man to be executed because he was no longer useful for fighting. When this happened, Koroth turned his massive head away, his 4 hands clenched into fists, his amber eyes closed. Danny saw pain in that gesture, real pain. Another time, a group of Veltari lords came to tour the prison. They were tall and thin, with pale blue skin and eyes that held nothing but cruelty. They walked past the cells and mocked the prisoners. They threw rotten food at the humans. They laughed at the other species. When they reached Koroth's cell, they stopped and praised him. They called him their beautiful weapon, their perfect killer. Koroth said nothing, but Danny saw his claws scrape slowly against the floor. He saw the muscles in those massive arms tighten with barely controlled rage. And that rage was not directed at the prisoners. It was directed at the Veltari lords. Danny began to understand something. Koroth was not a monster who enjoyed killing. Koroth was a prisoner just like everyone else. He was a slave, forced to do terrible things, and he hated every moment of it. The night before Danny was scheduled for his first arena fight, he could not sleep. He lay on the hard floor of the cell and stared at the ceiling. Around him, the other humans snored and shifted. One woman was crying softly in the corner. A young man was praying to gods that probably could not hear him in this dark place. Danny got up. He walked to the edge of the cell, as close to the energy barrier as he could get without touching it. From here, he could see Koroth's chamber. The massive alien was sitting against the far wall, his eyes open, staring at nothing. Danny cleared his throat. His heart was pounding so hard, he thought it might burst out of his chest. What he was about to do was crazy. It was probably the dumbest thing he had ever done in his life. But he was going to die tomorrow anyway. What did he have to lose? "Hey," Danny said. His voice was small in the darkness of the prison. "I know you probably think I am just another weak human. I know you could kill me without even trying. But I wanted to say something to you before I die tomorrow." Koroth did not move. He did not even seem to hear. Danny continued anyway. "I have been watching you, not because I am scared, even though I am. I have been watching because I wanted to understand. And I think I do now. You are not a monster. You hate this place just as much as we do. Maybe even more. I can see it in your eyes when the guards hurt people. I can see it when the Velthari come to laugh at us." Slowly, very slowly, Koroth turned his massive head. Those amber eyes fixed on Danny with an intensity that made the human want to run and hide. But Danny stood his ground. "I just wanted you to know," Danny said, "that I see you, the real you, not the killer they turned you into. And I am sorry for what they have done to you." For a long moment, there was only silence. His voice was deep and rough, like stones grinding together. "You are foolish, small one. Speaking to me will not save you tomorrow." Danny sat down on the cold floor. "I know, but I spent my whole life keeping my head down and staying quiet. I never talked to people I should have talked to. I never took chances. Seemed like a waste to keep doing that here at the end." Koroth stared at him for a long time. Then, for the first time in many years, he did something unexpected. He answered.